I know that there is no such thing as a magic paintbrush. There is a saying that it's not the paintbrush that makes your art better, it's the miles you put on the paintbrush. There isn't a tool out there that will magically transform your art, but having a lovely watercolour paintbrush will certainly make the painting experience more pleasurable, and having something that is not fighting you may just make a percentage or so difference to the outcome. My name's Liz Chaderton. I'm a watercolour artist based in Berkshire, and every week I share tips and tricks that I wish I'd known about ages ago. So when Meeden asked me would I like to try their brand new Quill paintbrushes, of course I said yes. I am not going to say no to trying out some new paintbrushes. I'll take you through the difference between round paintbrushes, mop brushes and quill brushes, and when you might use them. And then I'm going to specifically look at these brand new quill brushes from Meeden to see how they perform. Most artists end up with an embarrassingly huge number of brushes. You buy these brushes in the vague hope that it will transform your art and make you into this brilliant artist, and either they end up just accumulated, or maybe they end up absolutely trashed because you haven't looked after them, or you've used them to pieces and you know they've served their purpose but you can't bear to let them go. So I thought it would just be really useful before we go on and review these quill brushes that we just make sure we're speaking the same language and we've got an understanding of some of the different watercolour brushes that we might use. I've grabbed a few to demonstrate, and before I go on to those, here's my little illustration of a brush. Let's make sure we're talking, say, the same language. So we have three important parts. We've got the bristles, the ferrule and the handle. The bristles might be synthetic or natural hair. The type of bristle, whether they're soft or hard, whether they have snap, whether they bounce back into shape, is all part of the hair and that performance. We've got this area, this is called the ferrule, and it keeps the bristles onto the handle. It's probably going to be stainless steel, so it is then crimped onto the handle, and then you have the handle, which might be lacquered or it might be natural wood, and it's likely to have information, the size of the brush, that actually says 12, who made it, this one doesn't say, might have a code or the series, the name of the type of brush. A few things to say about the bristles, say they can be natural or man-made. With watercolour we're considering how well the hair carries water and carries paint, how controlled it releases it. The very end of the brush is, I would call the tip, but some people call the toe. Don't know why, but they're the same thing. In the bristles, in the middle, you've got the belly. Some brushes have big fat bellies, some are a little bit more skinny. Where it joins the ferrule is the heel of the brush, and that might be important because you sometimes paint right with that heel if you're doing more of a scrubbing motion. So the ferrule tends to be metal, a non-corroding metal, except of course we're going to see in our quill brush is something different. Inside here the hairs are tied and then they are stuck onto the handle, and the ferrule is protecting that joint and it is crimped onto the handle. One of the many reasons you should never stand your brush in your water, this is for watercolour, is that the water will get into the ferrule and it potentially will start to dissolve away the glue, and one day it will all fall to pieces. So corrode the ferrule, it can rot the hair, damage the tip, all sorts of reasons, but that's one of them. The handle, you will be looking for the shape. We tend to use a short handled brush with watercolour because we're often sitting to paint, whereas if you're at an easel you may have a far longer handle. Ours tend to be shorter handled. You're looking for the weight and whether it feels comfortable in the hand. You might choose to hold it at the top so that you have a far looser mark. You might hold it down here if you want a lot of control. So where you hold the brush and how it feels is going to be really important to you. Just something about the size. I mean, this says 12, and just to prove my point, this is a Quill brush, that is a size 6. You would expect a 12 to be bigger than a 6, wouldn't you? It just shows that different manufacturers have different sizing conventions, and different types of brush have different sizing conventions. So I would not go by the marked size. In fact, look, I think that's a 12 as well. Yeah, both of those are marked as 12. Totally different sizes. Worth just looking at the length of the hairs overall. Some are shorter and fatter. Some are long and thin, and it all affects that performance. Watercolour, we've got all different shapes. We can have flat brushes, we can have sword brushes, but here we're talking about the general round ones. So this is a round brush, and usually we're looking for it to come to a lovely point so that we can do precision marks. Then we have something called a mop brush. A mop brush tends to be, well, this one, look, it looks a bit fluffy, and you might think, oh, what's wrong with that? Let's wet it, and you can see that it comes to back to its proper shape. So if you look at brushes and think, oh, they're a bit fuzzy, let's do a kind of before and after. It's the wet shape that you need to worry about rather than the dry shape. This is a mop brush, and it is designed to hold loads of fluid and cover large areas, but not necessarily come to a particularly fine point. That's an oval wash brush, so it's round but slightly crimped to an oval. So this is all about carrying lots of fluid, large washes, but no detail. This is a compromise in that it's a mop brush, but does come to a point. This is specifically a quill brush, and the idea of a quill is possibly a halfway house. So it tends to be fatter, so it's got more fluid carrying possibilities, but it should come to a good point so you can do precise marks. So these two are all about volume. This is about precision. This one is a bit about precision and a bit about volume. Obviously they come in different sizes, from large through medium, and I expect I've got some very small ones somewhere. There's a smaller one. What size? You see, that's a 3, they say. Smaller ones will be for the tiny details, or if you're doing botanical art and so forth, and it will go down to brushes with virtually one hair. If you paint loosely, you're likely to be using larger brushes. If you paint on a large scale, again, you're likely to be using larger brushes. So this is how they've come. It's a set of 9 brushes. It says water collected new tech, soft strokes and no hair shedding. Most brushes will shed a couple of hairs as you start using them. If that continues, it is an utter pain because it'll get stuck in your wash and you'll try and get it out and you get funny marks. Continues, it's a sign of poor quality. I checked what the bristles were on this, and they are, I was told they are bionic nylon, and the handles are beechwood. Some handles of brushes, I think that might be bamboo. I think these might be bamboo. So you might worry about the handle wood from a sustainability point of view. But otherwise, it's the weight of the handles. Now let's have a look at these. 9 brushes. They are quill brushes. And they go from 1 to 9. So let's get them in order. And they are a really big size. And that's an 8. So that's a Daler-Rowney 8, which is something like a 4 there maybe. That might just give you a bit of an idea. So they're pretty big brushes, and that'll be interesting to see what fluid they carry. They look beautiful. Let me just tell you a bit about this quill binding. So they're all individually potted. That could be very useful for transport. But looking at the quill, they come with this protective cover, and it is just for transport. Oh, they've been rammed on, haven't they, with a vengeance. And I have to say that when I got them, this one, the number 7, had its top rammed on so hard that the top of the hairs were bent over, and I looked and was like, oh my goodness, I hope I can straighten those out. Because they're nylon, what I did, I put it in very hot water, not boiling, just below boiling, which slightly softens the hairs, and I straighten them out, and then I rubbed it backwards and forwards on some very mild soap and reshaped it, and I've left it to dry, and it looks absolutely fine. So don't panic with that, but it does give you the warning that once you've taken off this protective cover, do not put it on. It is for protection just from the factory, because if you try and put it on, the problem is you will catch little edge hairs unless you're amazingly careful, and it will splay out. That should be thrown away, whereas that pot I think will be quite handy, so I'd probably keep those. If we look at the quill, instead of the metal ferrule, they have this plastic sleeve round that is then tied on with wire. Aesthetically, I think they're beautiful. This is part of the brush. This is not part of the packaging. Don't try to remove it. I have heard of someone who thought this was packaging and was trying to take it off. Well, the whole brush will just fall to pieces. And in the olden days, they used to actually be made from the quills of, I think it was probably geese feathers, big geese feathers. And they used to use this bit, the quill, as the binding. Nowadays it's plastic, so if you are vegetarian or vegan, that isn't an issue. And see, these are synthetic bristles. It's worth just having a quick chat about natural hair. You can get Kolinsky sable brushes, you can get goat hair brushes, you can get squirrel brushes, camel brushes, pony brushes, all sorts of things. It's up to you and your conscience whether you want to use animal hair in your materials. I'm not here to say yes or no. Kolinsky sable, which is meant to be the very best in the world, it's not sable, it's from a sort of ferrety sort of animal, but they are trapped and killed. Now, some people say, well, these ferret animals go around killing chickens and whatever, so they are vermin. What's the problem? Some people say, I'm not comfortable with killing animals to use a product. I wouldn't wear a fur coat, so I'm not going to use brushes. Back to the brush, and my first impression is that this is beautiful. It's a weighty brush. It feels really nice. That beechwood handle, beautiful point, big size. The weight is good. When you get them out, it will be hard. So what happens is brushes, once they've been made, are dipped in a solution of gum arabic to keep them beautifully in shape. So when you get a new brush, you need to dissolve the gum arabic. Don't mash them on the bottom of your water pot. To just let it dissolve. It dissolves ever so quickly because gum arabic is the binder in our watercolours. Swish it through. Particularly you want to make sure that it's dissolved right out of the heel of the brush and the whole of the brush. If you've got a brush like this and you want to check that it's good, tap it on the side, see whether it comes to a nice point. So say my first impressions is that it's really nice. That is going to hold a lot of fluid. I'm going to give myself a fighting chance and use one of the mid-size ones. So this is a size 5. Just because I'm looking at how much fluid is in that really large brush, and I think it'll cover the whole of this piece of paper. So let's try a few of the different sizes out. Incidentally, the best way to dry your brushes, don't ever put them away wet because you'll get all little microbes and fungal spores and goodness knows what else breeding in there. If you possibly can, dry them facing downwards, because any water accumulated in there can come out and it won't ruin the tip. But if needs be, dry them flat rather than putting them in a pot so that that water finds it hard to escape. Let's see what this feels like. I would expect a quill to cover a large area, but I would expect, oh, look at the point on that. So size 5, look at the fine line that you can achieve. So it's that compromise or midpoint of the capacity of a mop and the precision of a round. Now let's feel how soft this is and some of the spring. So what I like to do and feel that control is start with a point, come down, up, down, just to feel how it responds. That sort of forming a leaf shape is quite a nice little exercise. So you start with that nice point, you have to come to a point the other end. I haven't done it for a while, so let's certainly forming a beautiful point at one end. I think maybe it's my skill not forming the best point at the other. Then you can do it the same way. So you want to do a leaf, you can to a point and go back. Two of those shapes can make really nice leaf shapes. It does boing wrap back, so there's quite a lot of snap to it, but it feels pretty soft. You can do it more randomly. Let's see. What I'm particularly impressed with is just how fine that point is, because that's a pretty large brush. Let's load it fully and see how controlled. Are we going to get splodges of paint released? No. This is a line from one dip. And it just goes on and on. Then see how it dry brushes. So with dry brushing, we haven't got a lot of paint in there, and we're dragging the bristles across the paper and really using the whole length of it right down to the heel to get the texture of the paper to show through. Nice. Right, let's use one of the really small ones. So we'll go to the number 1. We'll just swish it around to dissolve that gum arabic. With proper care, nice brushes should last for ages. Cleaning them, drying them, but also not using tiny amounts of paint so that you have to sort of poke into corners and muck up your tip. So this is the size 1. Just used a different blue so we can see. Interesting, say the marks I got even from that big one was so fine that these aren't, I mean they are slightly smaller but not noticeable. Obviously a smaller brush will not carry as much fluid, so you will not cover as big an area. So I would always recommend using a brush that feels a little bit too big for the area you're painting. Oh, this is nice. Doing these little, I don't know, strings of pearls almost, aren't they really? That feels very comfortable with this brush. Imagine this would be very nice for floral type paintings. It seems very responsive, really vary the size of your width, and even with this quite small brush you can get really decent sized marks. Shall I be brave? Let's turn over. And see if I mix up a big puddle. We see how much of the paper we can cover. In fact, this palette is too small. It's a very dinky little palette. I've got my paper flat, but I'm just intrigued to see how much paint was held in that really big brush. Well, I thought that those were hairs. Those aren't hairs coming off. It's obviously marks on the back of the paper. Now let's see how fine that point is. It's not bad for that size of brush. Now vary our line. These petal shapes I'm practicing, I sometimes find it easier to sort of do them away from me. How could I have forgotten that? You see, that's way better than doing it that way. It feels really nice, and say the weight of that in your hand is lovely. Definitely get a better size palette to suit that size of brush if that's what you're using. It's a size 3. I mean, looking at that, I would, in sort of a normal round brush, I guess I would be thinking that's about a size 8. Daler-Rowney 8 is like that, size 3, just for comparison. It feels incredibly light in my hand after that big chunky one. Again, beautiful fine marks, and I haven't seen any hair shedding whatsoever. Having said it always happens, nothing has come out of there. The brushes are available either singly or in different sets. In the UK they start at £9.95 for the 1, going up to £21.95 for the 9. The set of 4 is £49. The set of 9 is £99. That's with free delivery. In the US, the prices start at $8.95 for the size 1 up to $20 for the largest size 9. And you'll find that the 4-piece set is $34, whereas the 9-piece set is just under $70. So they're not cheap, but they are a professional brush. Having seen how these brushes perform, the question is, should you be looking to add a couple of quills to your stack? Well, if you aspire to paint watercolours in quite a loose way, I think these brushes are absolutely marvellous. And I would suggest getting a large quill and a medium to add into your repertoire. Do you need all 9 brushes? Well, no, the 3 big ones are close in size. They are different, but they are close in size. Do you need them all? Probably not. If you're feeling a little bit flush, the set of 4 would be lovely, and that is, I think, the 7, the 5, the 3 and the 1, and there is a sort of saving if you buy them all together. I've put links to the brushes in the description. Meeden have also very kindly given a 10% off if you use my link I do get a small commission. It will not cost you anything extra. I just want to be totally upfront about that. And I hope you enjoy using these brushes as much as I have.